welcome to episode 4 of the Knit McKinley podcast. My name is Kara. I blog about knitting and all things fiber arts related at theknitmckinley.com, and I've recently started this podcast or vlog experiment to do more yarn reviews, to show my works in progress, what I'm working on, what I'm designing, but mostly talk about yarn. So this is mostly going to be a space for yarn reviews, for what yarns I'm trying out, so either new to me or actually new yarns. In some cases, they will not be new to me. That's actually the case in the work in progress that I'm going to share today. If you have seen episode 1, I did share this. It was shorter then, and I'm really excited about the fact that I am nearing completion of my garter stitch angled scarf, which I'm knitting in the Mandala DK yarn by Lion Brand in their Centaur colorway. This is great. Oops, there you can see where my ball attachment was. So this is just a really pretty striping pattern. I am so glad to be near the end. Let me go ahead and show you guys what the end will look like. So this is just angled garter stitch. When I go ahead and get it finished, I'll have the pattern recipe on the blog, and I'll also do a review of the Lion Brand Mandala DK, because although not a new yarn, it is semi-new to me. I first used it for a 2-stripe ribbed scarf. That was a gift. I did that in the Wizard colorway. Really enjoyed that. I'll include a link to that in the description box below. And then I saw this colorway. I really loved it for me, so I'm super excited about having that in my collection for a fall winter scarf. I will say though, it's 105 stitches on the diagonal, so 105 stitches per row, DK weight. I'm actually really excited to get it off my needles. I love scarves and cowls and accessories to go around the neck. I am primarily a hat knitter though, and I am not entirely used to my projects taking like 50 and 60 hours. I have like maybe 6 sweaters and I have a good number of shawls, but most of what I knit is hats, and I do a lot of community and charity knitting, so a lot of worsted weight hats that are just quick knits. So this puppy has taken so long, and I'm so excited that I'm probably going to finish it in the next like 2 or 3 days. So the next time anybody sees me headed for like a DK or a fingering weight yarn and planning to cast on a scarf, could somebody just remind me that is going to take forever, and I'm going to hit the point where I'm like 80% of the way through it and just want to finish. And right now I'm fighting that urge, because if I were to cast off early, I won't get the length I want. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to get that length I want. I bought enough yarn for a reason. Alright, so that's my work in progress. I'm really excited about that. Depending upon how soon that gets finished, that may be this Thursday's episode or it may be next Monday's. We'll see how efficient I am. No promises. This is not a blog that's going to make promises. Alright, so on to the yarn review for today. So I'm really excited about this yarn. So this is a brand new yarn, not like the Mandala, which has been out for a couple of years but is new to me. This is actually a new offering by Lion Brand, and this is the Lion Brand Re-Spun yarn. So a caveat about my skein: I have used this yarn both for swatching and because I've knit a hat out of it. So I have used about a third, maybe a little bit more, maybe 35%, 40% of this yarn. And so when you go and buy your skein, you won't have a very loose label on it. Your label will fit tightly around your ball. So one of the reasons I was interested in this yarn is because it is part of their sustainable stitching line, and it's a 100% recycled polyester yarn. And they do have this logo on the back that it meets a global recycled standard. So I thought that was pretty cool that they are using recycled products in the yarn. Polyester usually comes from plastic like bottles. And there's a good number of different recycle standards or green or energy efficient standards out there that companies and manufacturers can use in their production. So full disclosure, I don't know all of what this means, but I am excited about it and I'm excited to learn more. This is Re-Spun. I showed the Thick and Quick in episode 3. I will include a link in that description in the description box below. And this is their worsted weight offering. Now the one thing I did think was a little funny, it does say that it's a bonus bundle on it. So it is a hefty skein of yarn. but I'm not sure what the bonus bundles are referenced to because it's brand new, so I don't know what it's a bonus of. That's okay. It is 10 ounces, 284 grams. It has 658 yards on it, and it's got 602 meters. You can see that it is a heathered color. This is the blush color. And it's funny, I actually got this a few weeks ago. I went back in to see the other colors because they all look heathered online, and my Joann's did have more of the colors. I picked this one up on impulse, and most of the colors at my Joann's have now been sold out. So I'm wondering if other people are seeing the same thing I'm seeing, which is at $10 for 658 yards for a recycled synthetic yarn that feels soft on the skein. This seems like a good yarn to try out. So for my crocheters out there, this recommends a J10 hook. It's a medium yarn, so it's a worsted weight. They recommend a J10 6mm hook, and you would get 14 stitches and 18 rows and a 4x4 inch to get the manufacturer's ball band gauge. For knitters like me, they recommend a US 8 or a 5mm hook, and it's 18 stitches and 24 rows to a 4x4 inch square. So this is a really soft yarn. So one of the things I was curious about with it being recycled and really emphasizing the recycled aspect of it, I was like, well, maybe it's going to end up feeling a little bit stiffer when you knit with it, and then you'll wash it and it'll soften up a little bit. When I did my swatch, I was so pleasantly surprised by how soft the yarn is. So this is my gauge swatch. And I always recommend swatching with a new-to-you yarn. I did get gauge, but one of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit more when I show my two Lighthouse hats is this is a lighter weight fabric than what you get out of some other number 4 weight yarns. So this is totally soft on my hands to work with. I was pleasantly surprised by that, even though it felt okay on the skein. I sort of expected to have a little bit of just a, ooh, that's a little rough in spots, but it's also really nice coming out of the skein. So I'm not trying to pick on my work in progress, but I did end up balling up that yarn because it kept tangling up on itself and it was super sticky. And so this yarn has been a pleasure to work with. Again, I did knit a whole hat out of it as well as the gauge swatch, so I've used probably close to 200 out of my 658 yards. And it didn't have any tangling, it hasn't had any knots or cuts in it, and it hasn't stuck to itself in a way that has made my knitting life, harder than it needs to be. So super pleasantly surprised. And again, really nice fabric knit here. So what I ended up knitting with it was a version of the Lighthouse hat. So the Lighthouse hat, I'll show you the original real quick first, is a watch cap style beanie. It's knit in the Woolies worsted weight yarn by Lion Brand. This is a super simple pattern. You start with, here, let me unfold the brim. You start with a 1x1 rib. You do that for a little bit more than 4 inches. Then you do stockinette stitch for a while before doing very simple knit two together crown decreases. I actually think this hat is a great entry point if you're looking for a very classic hat pattern and you're new to knitting in the round. Would highly recommend this one. It's something that's super simple and frankly very pretty. It's also good if you are looking for something with your worsted weight yarn and you're looking for a yarn substitution. So this is a very forgiving and flexible pattern. So I went ahead and thought, okay, this new blush yarn would be beautiful. I'd love to have a hat in this color in my collection. I also don't think you can see behind me, but there's at least 4 or 5 other skeins in very similar blush and mauve colorways, simply because I am having a little bit of a blush and a mauve colorway moment. So this is my Re-Spun Lighthouse hat. Now, one thing that you may notice immediately upon looking at it is you may say, Kara, your 1x1 bib is not very tidy looking. And it's actually not, and I recognized that, and I decided to not go back and reknit it at this point because I wanted to show this hat in the original pattern, and I wanted to do it as a sort of a moment or highlight of how yarns that are the same weight class can give you pretty different results. So these are both number 4 weight yarns. The Woolies worsted, which I have a skein of here, and the Re-Spun are both number 4s, and they both actually have the same needle size and gauge listed on them for at least the knitting side of things. I actually don't think I looked to see what it said for crochet. So even though the knit's the same, the crochet on the Woolies actually says 13.2 stitches. All right, I'm gonna need a crocheter in the comments to tell me if you normally see things like 13.2 stitches and 16 rows per 4-inch square on your J10. So they actually say you get slightly smaller stitches than the Re-Spun, which is 14 stitches and 18 rows for a 4-inch square on the same size crochet hook. So, I'm sorry. Thanks for coming down that little adventure with me. So what's interesting is when you have 2 worsted weight or number 4 yarns, there's only 6 or 7 yarn classifications that the Craft Yarn Council has. So these are both number 4s, but you do get a fairly different result. And let's look for a moment at the 2 yarns. So let me grab a strand of my Re-Spun and my strand of my Lion Brand Woolies. And I'm going to hold these up. I'm going to put the Re-Spun on top because that is the thinner one, and it's also the more colored one because the oatmeal is not. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to bring that up super close to the camera for you, and hopefully it'll focus in a moment. Because what I want to show you is that even though these yarns have the same weight, and for the knitters they give you the same gauge, there you go. You can actually see that even when I pull it, when I release slightly, the Re-Spun yarn is a good bit thinner than the Woolies worsted. That doesn't mean that they're not both worsted weight yarns. It just, means that they're slightly different thicknesses. So I think what I'm going to do is I will undo and re-knit my Re-Spun Lighthouse hat, but I wanted to go ahead and show you that even though the stockinette stitch parts at the top of the hats have the same gauge, and I love the fabric of my Re-Spun hat here in the blush, it is both a little bit thinner than the Woolies, and using the same knitting needles, my 1x1 rib is much looser on the Re-Spun hat than the Woolies hat. So that is just nature of the yarn right there, which I think is super interesting. I think it's so interesting the way you can take 2 yarns, similar classes, get similar gauge, and you just get completely different fabrics out of it. So these 2 yarns, they are a little bit different. I mean, the Woolies, I don't think I said this earlier, is 20% wool, 80% acrylic, so it's not a 100% synthetic. And again, this is a 100% polyester yarn here in the Re-Spun. So perhaps it's not entirely fair to compare them as if they were equal in terms of replacing each other, but I do think it's a good example of how 2 yarns, super similar in terms of weight and the gauge that you can get with them fairly easily on the same size needles, will behave pretty differently when you start doing things like adding in ribbing or any other texture to your pattern. So I overall would highly recommend the Re-Spun yarn if you're interested in trying it out. I'm going to hold it up. I had pulled out that strand to show you the thickness compared to Lion Brand, so now my skein has not only got a loose label because I've used close to 200 yards between the hat and the swatch, but now I've just got, loose yarn hanging off of it. So this is it again one last time. This is the Lion Brand Re-Spun. Super interesting addition to the fall lineup. Was really pleasant to work with. Very happy with the results. It'd be interesting to come back in a few months and see how the hat actually stands up to wear. And I hope that if you give it a try, you consider leaving a comment and letting me know what you think below. So in the description box, there are links to both a blog post that goes along with this video where I will have links to the hat patterns of the yarn, as well as I'm going to talk about what I'm going to do to modify my Lighthouse hat in the Re-Spun, because I'm going to do something to fix up that loose brim. There'll also be a link directly to the Lighthouse hat pattern, and then also I will try to include a link to the previous episode where I first talk about my work in progress. If you liked this, please go ahead and give it a like. If you have a comment, either if you've used the Re-Spun yarn, I'd love to know what your experience with it was, or if there's anything else you'd like to see me talk about on these podcasts. There's actually a wall of yarn behind me if you see anything that looks familiar. Or if you just have suggestions, I'd love to hear them. I'd also say go ahead and subscribe, but this is episode 4 and it might be too soon for that. But go ahead and like and comment if you found this content useful or helpful. Other than that, I hope you have a really good day, and I'll see you back here on Thursday.